Hello, Dr. G here from naturalfoodsdiet.org. Today I want to tell you about a natural food that is one of the most nutrient-dense foods that you can possibly find. Now let's just think about it. If we wanted to find a nutrient-dense organ, say in an animal we're going to eat, or even if it's a plant, what would you think of? Well, the brain is very nutrient-dense because that's where most of the action is, especially in humans. So let's think about the brain. You look at the brain, what food looks like a brain? Well, there aren't too many. Corn doesn't look like a brain. Fruit doesn't look like a brain. But there is one food out there that is a powerhouse of nutrition that sort of looks like a brain. And that's the lowly oyster. So what is an oyster? An oyster is a clam-like organism. They live in relatively shallow seawater, and they're in reefs or beds, and they filter the water to get their food. Now there's an advantage to that because the fact that they filter the water, they eat microalgae and plankton, which puts them very, very low on the food chain, so not likely to concentrate toxins. Now the disadvantage though, if an oyster is in some polluted water, it is going to filter this water, so it can have some problems. So one of the things you want to watch out for, there is an infection that oysters get, especially in warm, brackish water. Brackish water is where the water has fresh water mixed in. And when it's brackish and it doesn't circulate well, and if it's warm, you can get Vibrio vulsificans, which is a gram-negative bacteria that can cause pretty severe illness. So if you're getting your oysters during warm weather, from brackish waters like around the Gulf Coast area, Florida, Mexico, you may want to cook those oysters. Now, oysters in colder water don't have this problem. There is a chance, though, that an oyster can have another type of contaminant if they're in polluted water. Let's say you have an oyster sitting around a nuclear power plant in Japan. Well, I don't think you should probably eat that oyster in the bay next to the nuclear power plant that had a disaster. Now, you could try that. Now, Pacific oysters, are they a problem as this nuclear contamination spreads throughout the Pacific Ocean? I'm not sure. I still eat Pacific oysters, but I have noticed when I get up at night to go to the bathroom that I don't need a nightlight. It's like my body glows a little bit and I can actually see the path in front of me, and I hope that's not something to do with those radioactive contaminants in the Pacific Ocean. Just kidding on that little aside. Now oysters, because they look like a brain, they don't look that appetizing to a lot of people. In fact, some people say they look phlegmatic, which I guess is they appear to look like phlegm. In fact, I remember once I was an intern in the hospital at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm going down the halls. I turn into a room where there's 4 people in the room, and I look in the center of the floor, and there was something on the floor that was wet and slimy that sort of looked like an oyster. But it probably wasn't, although one of the patients might have dropped it. But that's a different story. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked here. Why do we want to eat the oyster? Well, the number one reason is DHA. We've talked about DHA over and over, how it's the most important molecule for humans. It's a polyunsaturated fatty acids that is in the sea food chain, and oysters are a very good source of that. Now, oysters also have many minerals like calcium and iron and zinc, selenium. So minerals are contained in oysters, and we need minerals desperately in our modern culture where we eat a lot of junk food, especially iodine. Oysters are rich in iodine as well. They're also rich in protein. So the oyster is a very, very nutrient-dense food, and it has many of the particular nutrients that modern humans are lacking in. Now you can get a test of your omega-3 to omega-6 ratio in the cell membranes of your red blood cells. And that test should come out 4 to 1, 3 to 1 of omega-6 to omega-3, and DHA is one of those key omega-3s. But the average person can have a score like 20 or 15 to 1, which is certainly suboptimal. And your brain will not function properly without enough DHA. Okay, so today I want to demonstrate how you eat an oyster. Now I like oysters raw, and so we'll demonstrate that today. Here's an oyster. So I take the oyster, and the most cupped side, most of the time an oyster is more flat on one side and cupped on the other. So you want the cupped side down so you don't lose the seawater that's in the oyster. Now the oyster, because you want to check to make sure the shell is closed. If the shell is closed, that means the oyster is still alive. What a better way to be sure you're getting the ultimate in nutrients when you're eating a living organism. All right, so we take an oyster knife. There's here on the hinge side, there's a little hole. We insert the blade, get a washcloth. Here I have an old towel. This helps you get a good grip on the shell. Now, you don't want to cut yourself, so you want to be able to get a good grip with the towel. We place the blade in. And if the oyster isn't too stubborn, we twist the blade, and it's starting to open here. Maybe. We twist the blade and it pops. When it pops, we don't want to spread it open, because they have an adductor muscle. What adduction means, when you adduct, you bring in. So the oyster has an adductor muscle that's connected to the top shell and the bottom shell. And what you want to do is sever the attachment of that adductor muscle. So you spread the oyster shell apart, but not completely. Then you just slide your knife along the top surface of the shell, and then we'll peel off the top surface. And what we do is we cut the attachment of that adductor muscle, which is generally around the middle of the shell. Okay, so we cut the adductor muscle. So here we have a shell with nothing in it. Here's our nice food on this other half, complete with salt water. Now, oysters, depending on where they live and what species they are, they have a different taste. So if you find an oyster that tastes like crap, there might be another species that you like more, or an oyster grown somewhere else. Another thing is, oysters are very sustainable. They eat microalgae and plankton. So oyster farms are not necessarily bad. You know, I preach against the farm-raised fish, and that's because they feed them garbage and toxins. But oysters, they don't have to feed at all. They just need to protect them from predators and diseases. Just give them a place to live, and they get the food that's naturally in the seawater. So what a better green way to get your super nutrition. So what we do when we have the oyster on the half shell is then we cut the other adductor muscle, like so. Now the oyster is free, and this is a raw oyster on the half shell. Now I like my oysters with this knife's dang dull. I like my oysters with a little lime. So we take some lime, we squeeze it on. and you want to make your brain strong, you want to recover when your health is shot, I'll tell you what, this is the key right here. And that is absolutely delicious. This is Dr. G. Thanks so much for watching.